mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. I think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. You don't know what it would mean to me to get you in here like you're 17. I think we're ready, and you do too. Come over here and make my dreams come true. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. I want you. We could feel as free as 17. Feels like a dream when you're on my team. We could feel as free as 17. When you're with me, you're gonna see what I mean. We could feel as free as 17.
Since I realized I was creating an entirely new genre, my bout of writer's block had vanished, and I was working on the book daily, even though it was still only in the outline stage. The book was the story of Michael Graves and this young, hip Manhattan bachelor's erotic life. A guy who loves to give love and loves to get love back, is what I promised my publishers. And I had envisioned a narrative that was elegantly hardcore and interspersed with jaunty bouts of my trademark laconic humor. It was going to contain at least 100 sex scenes. I mean, Jesus, why not? I guffawed to my editor over lunch in the bar at Patroon while he idly checked his blood sugar. And you could read the novel as either a satire on the new sexual obnoxiousness or as a simple story of an average guy who enjoys defiling women with his people on and make them think and laugh. That was the combo. Scatological humor intended and achieved. That was the plan. It seemed like a good one. Teenage Pussy would contain endless episodes of girls storming out of rooms in high-rise condos, and the transcripts of cell phone conversations fraught with tension, and camera crews following the main characters around, as well as 6 or 7 overdoses, attempts on the girls' part to win our Lothario's attention. There would be thousands of cosmopolitans ordered, and characters camcording each other having anal sex, and real-life porn stars making guest appearances. It was going to make Sodomania look like A Bug's Life. Chapters were titled The Facial, The Silicone Queen, The Porta-John, The Intrepid Threesome, Her Boobage, The Clitorati, The Getaway, Hairy Pinkish Tacos, Am I Too Big for You? You know, I really don't want a girlfriend right now. Look, I have to catch an early flight, okay? Hey, did you get a chance to pick up my dry cleaning? I am probably going to be quite distant now. And do you mind if I just jack off? Our hero, who calls himself the Sexpert, dates only models and carries around a large bag filled with various lubricants, Benoit balls, vibrating clitoral stimulators, and about a dozen strings of anal beads. Every girl he meets he makes wet with excitement. He has the cute habit of licking their faces in public and fingering them beneath tables at Balthazar while drugging their gimlets with OxyContin. He fucks one girl so hard that he breaks her pelvic bone. He fucks a semi-famous TV actress in the green room minutes before she's supposed to appear on Live with Regis and Kelly. He flashes his biceps and shows off his washboard abs. Michael didn't have a 6-pack, he had a 24-pack, a case, to anyone who might look. Women kept pleading with him to be more open and emotional, and they indignantly throw out lines like, "I am not a slut," and "You never want to talk about anything," and "We should have gotten a room." And that was rude. And no, I will not have sex with that homeless man while you watch. As well as my 2 favorites, "You tricked me," and "I'm calling the police." His usual answers, swallowing is about communication, baby. And, okay, I'm sorry, but can I still come on your face?
Hi, welcome to the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Book Club. We're here on live stream number 6, where the novel this week is Lunar Park. Now, the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Book Club was started by us patrons to better appreciate the new audiobook, novel, memoir, The Shards, which is released on the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast every 2 weeks. And it's actually already on chapter 17 or so. And so if you want to get involved or you want to hear this new audiobook, we do recommend that you sign up on the Bret Easton Ellis Patreon so you can also listen to his podcast, which has been around since 2013 and has guests from all over the place: Kanye West, Quentin Tarantino, Ryan Leone. Today, Lunar Park. This is a exciting novel. This is a mock memoir horror novel that's kind of a homage to Stephen King. So if Glamorama was the Robert Ludlum-esque thriller, this is his homage to Stephen King, the horror novel. But the other thing that's very interesting about this mock memoir is, as a lot of people in the Facebook group who are watching here, the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Facebook group, have noted that they think there's a connection between The Shards, the new audiobook memoir that he's releasing on the Patreon, and Lunar Park, because in both of those things, Bret Ellis is a character. Now, today on the live stream, we have the guests Walter Kern, Gigi Levangie, and Ryan Leone, who are going to come talk to us. And then later, we're going to have Mehdi Kushold come sit down with me, and we're going to go over some more stuff about the book. Just some housekeeping things. We do have a few announcements. BEE, let me just get it properly here. BEE Books is giving away 5 passes to the Women in Hollywood. It's the event by The Wrap. That's an entertainment magazine. And this is B conferences. There's going to be Janet Mock and Parma Lakshmi. All you have to do is email brett.assistant@gmail.com and just put in the subject line B conference. And he's got 5 tickets to give away. And he'll also be giving some Bret Easton Ellis bookmarks, signed bookmarks to the attendees that are going to be going to this digital event that you can get involved with. If you are looking for any signed copies of Bret Easton Ellis books, you can get them on www.breteastonellis.com. Other than that, I'm really excited, and I think there's a lot of excitement around this book because it's a bit different than all the books that happened before. Obviously, the last live stream was Glamorama, and that's a shocking kind of thriller book. It's actually so shocking, I don't know if anyone noticed that we don't have an intro video filmed for this live stream. That's because after Glamorama, everyone involved, including the cameraman who made the intro, has been on what I think is a month-long bender. Yeah, so there was a script, it was supposed to shoot, but absolutely nothing has happened, which is, weird, because that's also the starting of Lunar Park, because he's on his Glamorama book tour. So this is something that we're stuck with now. But Lunar Park is a interesting novel in the sense that every book before this was mostly concerned with, there's different sorts of unreliable narrators. There's always these problems with authority figures. But then what Bret does with this metafictional memoir is that he takes kind of the authoritative nature of the memoir, the emotional authority of a memoir, and uses this to his advantage to create this kind of story about Bret moving into the suburbs, getting married, having a child, and it's a whole different thing. But the first guest we're going to talk to with this is the author of Been There, Married That, and she also did the screenplay for Stepmom with Julia Roberts and Susan Sarandon. So please, I hope you enjoy the interview we have with Gigi Levangie. I'm here with Lunar Park. She's been a guest on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and now she's a guest on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast book club live stream. Gigi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm kind of a stalker at this point. Let's just face it.
Yeah, you're
Number one fan.
Well, that's what we need. The book club is trying to get. We have a lot of Bret Easton Ellis fans, and now we're trying to get them also Bret Easton Ellis fans who have read his books, because he's kind of two characters in a way. Twitter has made him two people, so he's different to a lot of people.
I think Bret has always been two people. Since he first became famous, we were obsessed, and like the book Lunar Park deals with his fame as a young man, a very young 21. So to me, he was a symbol even before I had read Lesson Zero. You know. So anyway, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
duality.
And that's something that comes up in the book, because now he's doing kind of this counterlife memoir, where you kind of have to just dive into it and take it as is in order for it to have its effects. Was this your first time reading Lunar Park, or have you been a fan before?
I had never read Lunar Park before. I did not know what to expect. And so when I started reading it, I was saying, because I didn't even read what it was about. I didn't read that it was like a pseudo memoir, but it wasn't real. But of course, Jay McInerney's in it. You know, all these real people, real school. But what was funny is I was like, wait, Bret has a child? Wait, Bret was married? Wait, Bret. and then I thought, no, it's just, this is him. This is his pseudo. It's a memoir, but it's not a memoir. And it's really, I feel like he's taking us along on some intense therapy sessions, you know, like just very, very intense therapy throughout. And it's fascinating. I think it's so entertaining, as he always is. So anyway, that's, I thought it was a memoir until I realized it wasn't.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, if in the book, when you read the back, it reminds you that this all happened, all of it is true. It's a book that I don't think, I talked about it with Walter Kern, I don't think this would work as a digitized book. Like if you're reading this on a Kindle, you could easily look up whether this was true or false. You kind of have to be between the pages.
Absolutely. And I also, I only like to read business books on Kindle, and or books that books on writing or that sort of thing, instructional books on Kindle. I like to read novels, real, hardback or paperback, actual pages. Then I can make notes and all that kind of thing. But this one, this wouldn't work, because of course we'd be double checking all the facts. But what's funny is it reminds me of the Shards.
Yeah.
On his podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, apparently there's a website that's trying to determine who the players are in the Shards. So now I'm thinking, okay, is any aspect of the Shard, is that real? Is it faux memoir? Is it what is it? So I thought that was really interesting that he kind of plays with that a lot, reality versus the surreal.
Yeah, that's because obviously the style of like a memoir, which you're very familiar with, you have this kind of emotional resonancy of it's true. Yes. This is what happened to me. You tell the story kind of like beginning to end, and you can lead up because you're supposed to kind of know what happens. That's why you're reading the memoirs, you know them. But then with the Shards, he's kind of claiming this to be his the thing that set off everything in his life. And it's also using the authority of a podcast. So he has found a way to take this this literary technique, this kind of like using the mock memoir. He's found a way to use that same authority in the Shards, and I think that's what's making it so like. I think it's a Reddit page where they're just everyone's like, is this real? What's going on? Is there a trawler? And it's just And
I looked up the trawler like immediately. That was after the first episode. The trawler. What were girls getting stalked and killed in the valley in 1980, 81, in the summer of 81.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was on his podcast, we did talk about the lack of serial killers today, as opposed to when we were growing up in the 70s,
Yeah.
in the early 80s, where we didn't have camera phones. You could pick up a hitchhiker and drop them off on a freeway off ramp. But it's funny you said that I write memoir, and I call my books fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So I always go over fiction.
Yeah.
But it's just playing with stuff that could be real, doesn't have to be real. I have a real imagination when I'm even in a situation that's actually happening. I think about different ways it could play out,
Mm-hmm.
and with a lot of exaggeration, etc. But I thought this book, it combines some of his best talents, his best skills, sort of taking down what's real and what's happening in a certain part of society.
Yeah.
And then, but what's really touching is the way he handles fatherhood.
Yeah.
Or the lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Like it's yeah.
And I didn't realize, this is so sad, that Bret's father died at such an early age. I mean, for me, early, because I'm 58. So anything around my age is way too young.
Yeah, of course.
But oh my God, they're a child. But so that part threw me too, because then I thought, is this real? Is this relationship that the writer inside the novel has with his father, is that the same relationship or similar one to what Bret had with his own father? And that part's really poignant.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you, is because you've been on this podcast, him. There's something about this where I can't tell if this is him being honest, where he's using some fictional techniques to show how he really felt, or is he just going, I can do this too? Like, I can, like, when you read these memoirs where people have this big heartfelt like understanding of things, is he just showing, I don't just do American Psycho, I can kind of write anything? Is it, I don't know if he's like winking at me, or if this is like
right,
or if it's honest. And I don't think I'll ever get an answer.
I'm not even sure that he could answer that. To me, he is a writer. That's a person, he gets up every day. I believe that he writes every day. He reads every day. He probably wants to experiment. I don't even know if he knows. I don't know how much he outlines in the book. I was following what this writer, Bret, the character in the book, Bret, he's mapping out his next book. And because I'm writing a book right now, I'm like, oh, what does he do? How does he do it? Does he do an outline? All the questions that you want to ask writers who are really successful and do it every day, and what are their techniques? So that part I thought was really interesting. But there are moments that are so sad and so revealing, especially towards the end, that I truly think, and yet there are really funny moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a character who's stumbling through his life.
Yeah.
He's always drunk, or he's high, or he's doing blow at basically a kid's Halloween party. And and then he has like a session, the therapy set, the couples therapy session, which I had in my last book. I think that's a staple.
Yeah.
When you're writing about people from a certain social class or whatever, that you have to have the therapy session in the book. And so it was really fun to see how he pulled that one off. But I thought he captured the wife, Jane, really well as well. Like, that part was interesting for me. Got the female side that brought out his sort of warmth and his confusion about who she was married to and why he's behaving this way, no matter what she does.
She's like, she's never made as hectoring. Like, there's like this thing with, when you read John Updike or Philip Roth, there's a general bitterness towards women in there because they've had bad relationships. But this seems to be someone who just supports him through his bullshit, and it's a very strong character.
Right. I'm wondering if that's because Bret himself grew up with two sisters,
Yeah.
and seemed to be closer to his mother than to his father, or at least that's how it appeared to me. So I thought he captured that well. I thought the kids were very well drawn out. The kids' interests, like how I'm sitting there going, how does he know all this? I have kids and I've forgotten. I mean, I have two that I know of, right? I always say, and I've forgotten the details about what an 11-year-old boy wears, what he listens to, what he's playing on his computer,
Yeah.
and the deep feelings they have, the deep ambivalence towards their parents. He captures all that.
Yeah. The only thing that is different, I think, because they had them being a little bit over the top with the homework. Like she's reading Lord of the Flies, and it's like
yes.
That's something you don't like here in Iceland. They do not have a difficult workload.
Well, I wonder. So in Iceland, you don't have the same pressure because what he was commenting on, and in a satirical way, was how parents on the west side of LA or in New York,
Yeah.
right, how they put private school parents mostly, how they push their kids. The kids are on the fast track, or they want to get them on the fast track to Harvard, which, by the way, nobody cares about Harvard anyway.
Yeah.
I couldn't give a shit about Harvard. But there is this push from the time kids are very little. I mean, you've heard the story. I mean, look at the parents who cheated.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
hired people to take the SAT for their kids because their kids, wouldn't score that well, just to get into USC.
Yeah.
So yeah, that pressure is real.
Oh, definitely.
But he of course heightens it, and then the 6-year-old girl dressed sort of like a hooker for Halloween is hilarious, and that happens too.
Yeah. I have a younger sister who did the same thing.
Yeah, and it's not with a wink. It's like that's really happening.
Yeah.
So all that stuff, the domestic life of sort of a Hollywood couple is really, he captures it really well. It's really funny and disturbing.
Yeah.
But his commentary is spot on.
In some of the interviews where he's answered about Lunar Park, he mentions the Mitchell Allen character, who's a character that was in Rules of Attraction, who was in college with him. And it's this certain type of middle-aged guy in that position, yes, who kind of covets his neighbor's wife, and his wife is silent about it. I think he just nails a certain type of man. He's playing a certain type of man that I don't think he is in real life. And he also, he captures just the men around him seem to be real images of people I could be friends with right now.
Oh yeah, like these are the guys who were, going to take on the world, very privileged, right? And it gets to all of us. Eventually, life just gets to all of us, and it kind of flattens out our edges.
Yeah.
So that before you know it, you're a 40-ish guy, balding, and you're going, is this it? Like, I have the house, I got the kids are on Adderall and whatever antidepressants they're on. And is that all?
Yeah.
It's the old song, right? The David Byrne song. Is this my life? And it is.
Yeah.
And he captures that so well, and that's like I find that not sad exactly, but true, and I've seen it a lot.
Yeah,
and with women it's the other thing, because the woman that Mitchell is married to, Nadine,
yeah,
she drinks too much, she covets another person's husband, she's jealous, she's just a walking mess.
Mhm.
I mean, she's just a mess. And sorry, that's my one of my lights just dropped. Am I still here?
You're still there.
I'm still here. My inner light will shine. It's
Yeah.
okay. But he captures like the quiet desperation of the suburbs, of the upper class suburbs.
Mhm.
And he does it like nobody else. I don't know. I mean, maybe Updike, but that was so long ago.
Yeah, there is like that
Um,
scene about him about to drive out of town and just go to New York, and that kind of has the Rabbit Run parallel.
Yes.
But I think there's something, I don't know how, it's almost like he goes, I could have had this too, guys, and he just fills in all the stuff that some people had to live an entire life to be able to know.
Exactly. Well, these are people who followed all the rules, and they did everything they were supposed to do. And here you are, mid 40s, and you somehow, maybe subconsciously, are looking for an escape.
Mhm.
Could be another woman, could be a car, could whatever it is.
Yeah.
But something's wrong.
Mhm.
We have a lot of that in LA.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere.
It's you know what? It's the human condition. I mean, nobody gets out alive, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I might have an exception in my case. I'm hoping, but
Really? Well, I'm half Bulgarian. They last forever.
okay, perfect.
Knock wood. Yeah. So let's go.
But I guess the other thing is he says this is a homage to the stuff that made him in a lot of ways. He has like the monsters end up being the creations of his childhood. This is about being a child and then seeing it from the other point of view. And it's also about, like he said, a reference to Stephen King. And Stephen King and him both, he doesn't do this in all of his works, obviously, but he does it in this one, where he does the Stephen King thing as the writer as hero, almost like the writing life and the creative life has something to it. It could be horrific. It doesn't have to be good, but it's something dazzling and interesting. It's something you can't really film. You can't, whenever they try and film someone being a writer, it's just a guy at a typewriter. But when it's written, you can kind of make the written words, it makes you believe that writing there's something to it. It's exciting.
Well, I think that's I think that can be true in the same way that reading a book is so fulfilling, because it's magical. It takes you into other worlds. Where do you want to go today? I mean, I'm obsessed. I'm on Audible. When I'm walking, I'm on Audible. Right now I'm going through Raymond Chandler.
Mhm.
Right? I'm going to be going through Hemingway. I went through John le Carré. So and Jane Austen, because I didn't really get Jane Austen when I was growing up. I grew up lower middle class, working class, and what I more understood Philip Roth than
Yeah.
Jane Austen. I like muscular writing, visceral writing. But so writing is part of I think because I was only really good at reading growing up. I was a little fat kid. I couldn't play sports. I was allergic to smog. I couldn't play outside. Blah blah blah. Tiny violin. Reading reading saved me, and then later on, writing has done the same thing. And I would do it, and I do it whether I'm paid or not. I am not me. I am not normal. I am not a normal person without writing. I can't go a day. Today I have not written,
Mhm.
so I will have to do it later.
Mhm.
I just must. It's the anti-anxiety medication, antidepressant medication. Because I do not take any of those, that I know what I need. I need to write, and I need to exercise. I need to raise normal kids. That's about it. But is it heroic? I mean, I love that he paints it that way with his words, that he saves himself and his family in a way through what happens towards the end of the book. And he is heroic. And Stephen King, you're right, he does the same thing. But I never thought about it that way. I know that it saves me.
Yeah.
And I guess that might be enough.
That's true. But there's another element in this where he's talking about narcissism and vanity, which is a big thing in all of his work. But that when you're a writer, when you're someone like yourself, where you spend a lot of your time in your own head, when it comes to like you said, you have 2 kids. Where does that do you ever feel like the tension between the writing self and then the parent self? Because he makes this up in this book, but he obviously doesn't have that in his day-to-day life.
Right.
But he did have this relationship with his father who had kind of the same, what he portrays like it as is almost the same. His father is this same sort of narcissistic figure as a writer is.
Yes.
Because he has to pull away from the people around him, because you have to be alone with people who don't exist, who matter more than the people who do.
God, it's so interesting that you bring that up, because I'm watching the Hemingway documentary. Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, I've seen the first episode. It's actually on silently beside us.
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah.
Well, in the second episode, Gellhorn, his third wife, I think, was it Martha Gellhorn?
Martha Gellhorn.
Okay, so she says that she can't. You cannot be a writer, or she can't be a writer and be a mother. I don't know if she's talking about herself, I don't recall, or Hemingway. But the bottom line is, if you are a writer, you have to carve out time, you have to compartmentalize. And sometimes you do that so much that you can't really function in a relationship or with children, because obviously they take you away from the people that you are sitting with for hours, and that you really need to finish their story. But I always thought, for me personally, writing was a good way to have a normal mothering relationship with my kids, where I could stay home, I could raise kids, I could carve out my 3 hours a day when they were little, and now they're older now, I have much more time, and they have actually fed my writing in a way. But I have sacrificed, it's not a sacrifice to me, I've sacrificed a banging social life. I've sacrificed shopping with friends. Mm-hmm. I've sacrificed, lunches with friends. It's not exactly a sacrifice to me, but I see where women are at my age and also younger, and the relationships they have, which I just didn't build up as much, because I had to write, and it wasn't taken seriously by, a lot of people, but I had to take it seriously.
Yeah.
So that's the life I've chosen.
And it's interesting, because you see this in like in the Hemingway documentary, when they talk about the absent parent who was like, it doesn't always have to be an artist, but they were working all the time and they were away. There is this kind of like where that's changed generationally. People, parents around my age, they almost are too much with their kids to the point. To the point where
helicopter parenting.
Yeah, to the part where if you cut out those 3 hours, that would actually do a lot for kids learning boundaries, and they would see like, oh, my mom does something. She works. She doesn't just live for me. And it's strange. It's strange that this sort of thing in Lunar Park is kind of talking about a type of parent that doesn't really exist in that same social stratum anymore. Because now parents are just, if you look at even Hollywood people around my age, being a parent all of a sudden is the only thing that they are interested in anymore.
Yeah, it's great. People say there's no balance. There is a balance. You have to show your kids that you also care about yourself, because they need to have respect for what you do as well. Like, I wouldn't make my kids read all my books, but they need to know that I write and I take it seriously and I do it every day. No matter what, I do it every day. So I think that's healthy for children, and they also see that I like doing it. So this is what I've chosen. I've been lucky enough to make it work. But yes, parents, it's like they're either overbearing or they're neglectful. Like, there's no, I don't know, there's no balance. So that's where you get like the helicopter parenting and that sort of thing. But that could be less about the investment of time and interest. And like, it's one thing to go to all your kids' games. That's another thing to view your child as like an accessory that has to get into this school or get into that school, or has to make you always look good, because that's not good parenting either. I mean, in my,
Yeah.
It's best just to have like 4 or 5, 6 of them, and then treat them like appliances, and
Yeah,
have them raise themselves.
exactly. But this does bring up like another, like an interesting thing with the ending of the book. The ending of the book, I asked Walter about it. I know I'm going to talk, because I'm talking to John Niven. I don't know if you've read him before. He wrote Kill Your Friends.
I feel like I have. Okay, what was it about?
It's about like the music industry, the club industry in London in the 1990s.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. He's a good writer. Like, he's very popular in Iceland as well. So I knew a couple people who were fans of him, and he's friends with Irvin Welsh, who we had on another episode. So
I want to be big in Iceland. I want to be the biggest thing in Iceland.
Well, you write like you should be. Why not? Yeah.
I have to get there.
Well, there's a volcano right now. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it. There's a great
there you go.
club. You can come do stand up.
Perfect.
But the ending of the book, that is, there's this thing where he's saying that this child he's created is just between the pages, or between the covers of the book. And it's kind of reversed, because he's saying that if you see his son, tell him he can find me here between the covers of Lunar Park, the back pages of Lunar Park. But this is this kind of like between the child and his father, and he's reflecting all these feelings, but it's also about the act of creating something. And how do you, like, he's doing this as someone who his only child is between the covers of Lunar Park. It's a fictional child. But do you think that like this feeling of being a writer and creating these fake worlds, how does it compare to the parenting aspect as well?
Ooh, well, that's an interesting question. So being a parent,
it's like creating something.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, when you become a parent, you have to, even though you want to be like those bumpers that people have when they're bowling and they're bad bowlers.
Yeah.
You want to be the bumpers, right? So you want to let your kid kind of stay on the straight and narrow, but also be able to make mistakes and come back from that. So you create your children, but you don't really have anything. They could come out a million different ways. Once they're born, you realize that you can have 5 kids and they are 5 completely separate human beings with no parallel interests or anything, no shared interests. So in that way, you don't have, as a parent, you don't have anything to do with how to mold them, except that you want to be there for the basics. You want to make sure they're fed, they're loved, you smile when they come in the room, that sort of thing. I personally made made sure my kids were physically active, and I think that's a big deal. And I also said, well, I said two things: be polite and don't be a pussy.
Wow.
That's
Okay,
it.
that's great.
That's it. So if you got those now,
Be polite and don't be a pussy. Yeah, that's a great tweet.
People get mad at me for tweets like that, though. Like, I'll say "man up," and people are like, "You don't understand. I have all these disabilities." Okay, all right.
But how does that affect someone like with your temperament? You're writing these novels, and especially if you're making something funny as well, that's a level of control where you want to control how the person reads, how they react, and you want a response from them. Like, that temperament doesn't seem to mix well with the idea of what you just said, which is just, yeah, you got to let them kind of be their own thing, especially if you have this in you where you want to control everything in these fictional worlds.
Well, we can only control what we can control. So we can only control the words we put on the page. But then later on, for example, if I'm at a book reading, I edit. So when I read something out loud, I'm editing while I'm reading it out loud, even though it's like it's never done. It's never completely done. And you kind of have to leave it to have sort of a faith that things will work out, but also, gosh, there's just a balance of doing everything, like making sure you are present and also leaving it up to whatever higher power or whatever their destiny is. But in order to do that, you have to also build some inner strength and resilience in your children. But maybe my books, that's why I write, is because I can control that universe. I don't know. I haven't. I'm not really a therapist. I don't do a lot of therapy,
I don't know.
So but now I'm thinking I might need it.
No, I just because like reading this book, it brought up so many questions about, like, why is he so unwilling to be involved with his kid in this fictional world? Because he does write fiction where he's already controlling everything, and even when he's controlling it, he's keeping a distance, not only because he can't control the kid, but also because he can't control whether he'll let them down or not. And that's something,
Right.
There's something with an artistic temperament where you see this in, like, movies, and in the documentary with Hemingway, as soon as, like, he falls in love with a new woman and he writes a new book, because as soon as he can let them down, or he's not the character he can control, he wants to move on and be the character he can control again. And that seems to be a common trait with writing, and that seems to be what Bret's commenting on here. And that's why I find it, fascinating.
Well, that's funny. With Bret, he's been in a relationship for a long time, but I remember feeling that way about place. So I would need to move. Like, I had to get out of. I wrote about the Palisades. Then I wrote about Malibu. Then I wrote about New York. Then and then Santa Monica. And I'm going to be writing. I'm going to be writing about Tennessee now. So I don't trade men. Although I'm open to it. No. Although I have been married 3 times. Maybe we're getting too deep inside my psyche. But there is something that I just mine, and my first book was semi autobiographical, very semi, but I did mine my young adulthood and childhood for that, and then I was sort of done with that, so I didn't go back. So I think there's something to that. Certainly Hemingway needed that excitement of a new woman and a new place. He needed to go to Cuba. He needed to go to Spain. He needed to go wherever he was going. Mm-hmm. He needed it to feed his creative juices. But I don't think Hemingway meditated, so maybe the title of that,
That could have been mindfulness.
Go inside. Yeah, go inside, babe. Because you can be just as miserable in Cuba as you are in San Diego. It's like you take yourself with you wherever you go. But I do think for me, it's place. It's like shaking it up a little, shaking up what I see. I was actually told that by a filmmaker who was shocked that I had never lived in New York. This was 13 years ago. And he said, you must live in New York. If you're going to write, you must live. And then we moved there for a little while. So anyway, very important to soak up your environment.
So I guess what do you feel about the ending of the book? Did you think this was hopeful? Do you think this was like hopeful in like this really heartfelt way? Or was it kind of like, a wink, like, yeah, this is how memoirs end. I can
No, I thought it was really, for me, there was nothing satirical about the ending. It was very touching. It's very moving to me. I felt like he had sort of cracked himself open, his psyche open, and laid bare his pain. And so however many tricks it took to get us there, I was very touched by the ending, and I really appreciated it.
Oh, nice. Well, this has been really, really great. Thank you for coming on to the live stream.
Thanks. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, you're perfect.
I woke up in Milan. I woke up in Singapore. I woke up in Moscow. I woke up in Helsinki. I woke up in Cologne. I woke up in various cities along the eastern seaboard. I woke up cradling a bottle of tequila in a white limo with bullhorns attached to its front fender as it raced across Texas. Why did Bret miss the reading? Paul Bogards was constantly asked by the press. After a pause, Paul would answer with his now customary vagueness, fatigue. A new tack. Why did Bret postpone the whole leg of the tour? Another long pause before, allergies. Then a longer pause before the confused journalist tentatively mentioned, but it's January, Mr. Bogards. Finally, after another drawn-out pause on Bogards' part, in a small voice, fatigue. This was followed by yet another very long pause, and then in barely a whisper, food poisoning. The people were making so much money, there was enough pornography and dismemberment to appease my fan base, so the book was on just about every bestseller list, despite reviews that usually ended with the word yuck, that schedules were inevitably readjusted, because if they weren't, my publisher would suffer huge financial losses. Everything about my career was now measured in economics, and giant bouquets of flowers had to be sent to my hotel suites in order to soothe my insecurity rages. Every hotel on the GLAMORAMA World Tour was required to provide 10 votive candles, a box of chewable vitamin C tablets, an assortment of Ricola throat lozenges, fresh ginger root, 3 large bags of Cool Ranch Doritos, a chilled bottle of Cristal, and an unlisted outgoing-only phone line. And at all readings, the lights above the podium had to be orange-tinted, because this would bring out the darkness of my salon-induced tan. If these contractual demands weren't met, the fine would be split between Knopf and myself. No one said being a Bret Easton Ellis fan was easy.
Yeah, no one said being a Bret Easton Ellis fan was easy. That was a reading done by Colden Martin. He's one of the producers for the Bret Easton Ellis podcast book club live stream. that was a great talk with Gigi Levangie. Thanks again for coming on the live stream. Lunar Park, to anyone who's a listener to the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, Lunar Park really plays with a concept that Bret brings up in a lot of his interviews, which is, what is your central trauma? And that comes out in Lunar Park in a way that you can see that his relationship with his father seems to be a central issue in his life. But then in the fictional character, the Bret Ellis, the writer in Lunar Park, another part of his kind of central trauma is the things that he's created. And like, obviously, because, you know, I was talking with Gigi about, you know, the creation and having kids and the comparing the two and what it's like. And that's also at play here in Lunar Park, where you have Patrick Bateman, you have Clay from Less Than Zero. They're coming back and kind of haunting him. The things that he's created come back and do this in the same way that his child is there. And so this is an interesting thing for anyone who's been listening to the podcast. You can see that the questions that he's asking other people are also questions that he's constantly kind of searching out in his work. Gigi, thanks for the interview, and I apologize to everyone who's watching who had to hear me laugh that many times. That was wow, that is a sharp laugh. But the next guest we have here on the live stream is someone who's also been on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and Lunar Park is his favorite book of Bret's. I'm talking about Ryan Leone. He's also a person who's very active in the Bret Easton Ellis Facebook community and just the Bret Easton Ellis Patreon community. After, I think, being on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, he's really kind of been like involved and constantly in conversations, things like that. So if you are a fan of Bret Easton Ellis and you're a listener, a Patreon on the podcast, do join the Facebook group. There's a lot of stuff going on. But the next guest, like I said, is Ryan Leone. He's an author and a filmmaker. He wrote the book Wasting Talent, and this is the chat I had with him about his favorite book, Lunar Park.
Okay.
So we're here with Ryan Leone, the guest on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and now the guest on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast book club. He's the author of Wasting Talent. He's got fans all over the place, and the more people who read his books or his book, the more people get into what he's doing. And he's got a very interesting story about Lunar Park because he read it at a very interesting time. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. And first and foremost, thank you for including me. You know how much I love Lunar Park, so I was like really excited when you asked me to do this. So thank you.
Yeah, Lunar Park is an interesting novel in the Bret Easton Ellis catalog because you actually mentioned this in the Facebook group, and anyone who's watching right now, we have a Bret Easton Ellis podcast Facebook group where we are kind of all coming together and we're following the Shards, which is his new novel, audiobook, memoir, where we're kind of going along with it. And we're also doing this book club where we read all of his stuff. And the Lunar Park novel is this weird kind of blip after everything he wrote. It's this thing where it feels like it's heartfelt, and it kind of is like the reverse engineering of everything that came before, if you want to understand his writing and aesthetics. And I'm really interested, Ryan, why is this your favorite book of Bret's?
Well, first of all, I read it actually before I'd been to prison. Maybe a year before I went to the bookstore and I bought everything that Bret had written up until that point. I think that may have been the first thing that I think that was my introduction to Bret. It might have been Psycho, I don't remember. And my first impression of it was good. But when I was in prison, I had to go to solitary confinement for disciplinary reasons. So I was essentially locked in an 8x10 cell 23 hours a day. The only book that I had was a copy, some tattered copy of Lunar Park that somebody had given me. And so I probably read the book, I don't know, a dozen times, and I was able to actually, dissect it, learn from it, kind of mine lessons from the book. And it's my favorite book of his because I think it's the most I think it's, I don't know, I guess the most metaphorical. I think a lot of people, when I got out, I talked about this when I was on the podcast.
Yeah.
When I got out, I would go on Goodreads and I'd go on Amazon and I'd read other people's reviews, and a lot of people were dismissing it, saying that it was corny. Some of the horror elements were cheesy. I never took it that way. I always looked at it as metaphorical, and I'm also a sucker for anything meta. I just love when Bret does meta, because I think he does it so well. He did it in Lunar Park, Imperial Bedrooms. To me, I think that's when he's at his absolute best. I think that's when he's at his most precise, observer of the human condition, when he's employing meta quality into his work. That's probably why I like it the most. And also, I have a good relationship with my father. That book is, about a tumultuous relationship he had with his father, but it was so intimate, and that was such a personal portraiture. I think that it's just universal. We all have fathers, and I really connected with the amount of affection that he extended towards his father, even though the relationship was flawed. And I think that's why, to me, the novel was as effective as it was, and why it left such a long-lasting impression.
So one of the aspects of Lunar Park is there's this thing about manhood and male behavior. Bret Easton Ellis has talked about in interviews that Mitchell Allen, the character he brought back from the Rules of Attraction, he brought him back as a way to comment on a certain type of man. But what's interesting is that the way that Bret acts in the novel is a certain type of male behavior. He's a suburbanite, trapped man that has been talked about a lot in literature, and this is something that he's kind of expressing in his own way. But you're an expert on male behavior in a lot of ways. How did you navigate through this male identity that Bret constructs inside of Lunar Park?
That's a great question. So when I did read it while I was in federal prison, I was making a lot of observations about men. One thing that I had noticed, what I'd say is probably, the largest commonality amongst inmates, at least male, is that they grew up without a father. So it's like, it becomes this obsession. People often talk about the fact that they were raised without a father, didn't have the nuclear family, and a lot of hyper masculinity and bravado kind of rises out of that. I guess it's a response to it. So when I was reading it, it was something that I was definitely already thinking about at the time. And that's one of the things that I like most about Lunar Park is, on top of it being this very complex metaphorical portraiture of his relationship with his father, there's also, the social commentary that we've come to expect with Bret Easton Ellis. And that took place post 9/11. So there was post 9/11 hysteria. It was very nuanced. It was kind of showing, what the suburban man was supposed to be, the suburban archetype. And I just found it really interesting because I was in such a radical contrast to that in prison. It's such a difference. It's such a stark contrast compared to what the suburban mold was that he was talking about. And what I think that was, without giving too much away about the book, I think that's what his father would have wanted him to be like. And with the irony of him resenting him simultaneously.
Yeah, there is this, because it is like a class thing. This is a certain type of people that are there, and you hit it on the head. But there's also this, like, his father is, like you said, his father wanted him to kind of be like this. Or I want to add to you, is this how he understands his father's behavior? So if you have an absent father, which you say, like, you had a great relationship with your father, he's trying to see how could he make a character who's sympathetic, but also kind of, to the kid, portrays everything that he felt about his father, because that happens in the novel as well. He's not the best father to his kid, but there's no point in the novel where we're not really sympathetic to him, because he is this is his most, I think, out of everything Bret's done, this is his most heartfelt or at least sympathetic work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that character, the caricature of Bret, is Bret's father. You know, it's like Robbie is Bret as a kid, but the caricature of Bret is his father, flawed, trying to do the best that he can. And what I took out of the subtext of that is he was trying to convey forgiveness. He was forgiving his father for his flaws. And I think that's why people get so confused, because it starts with that meta, like almost mock memoir in the beginning of the book. And it's, I think, what his father wanted him to be. And I think he had a lot of fun with that, you know, this idea of what he thought his dad wanted him to be, but it was actually his father, you know, and that's a timeless theme. We become our parents. It's just, it's a cyclical part of the human experience.
That was Ryan Leone. Thank you very much for coming on the live stream. A few little housekeeping things as we go along. Obviously, this is live and we make mistakes. Colden Martin, the person who produces the readings, and we played the reading earlier from the first chapter, from the beginnings chapter. It was actually cut off early because it goes to a blue error screen, and we cut it off because we thought it was the end of the video. There's actually more reading, so we're going to put that reading again at the end of the live stream if you want to listen to it. So that's, sorry about that, Colden. Just so everyone knows, this whole project with the Bret Easton Ellis Podcast Book Club is done by patrons of the podcast, and we all are kind of volunteering our time in doing this. So Colden puts a lot of work into these things, and we don't want him to feel like he's unappreciated. Of course not. He puts a lot of work. So we'll make sure we play this at the end. The next guest coming up. So we've had Ryan Leone, we've had Gigi Levangie, and now we're at the guest that we have now is the author of Blood Will Out and Up in the Air, that was made into a movie with George Clooney. I talked to Walter Kern, and I hope you guys enjoy the interview. We're here with Walter Kern, the author of Up in the Air, Blood Will Out, and most importantly, he is the guest on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast when The Shard started, Bret's new audio memoir novel that he's piecing together every episode. Every 2 weeks, a new episode is coming out, and Walter Kern was the first guest for the first chapter of The Shards. Walter, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm here in Livingston, Montana, and ready to talk Bret Easton Ellis, one of my favorite writers.
Oh, perfect. Well, this live stream, we're talking about Lunar Park. This is the sixth live stream. We just did GLAMORAMA last time, and now it's on to Lunar Park, which is, I think it's the key to kind of understanding Bret in reverse. It's almost like a book that reverse engineers his entire catalog up to this point because it's so different. How did you respond to Lunar Park when you first read it and then rereading it now?
Well, Lunar Park is, I suppose, what you'd call a counterfactual roman à clef. It purports to be the heartfelt, true story of Bret's life, and is, of course, a very mischievous rewriting of his, of his history and of his self. I mean, it's a book about a settled suburban life, as settled as a Bret Easton Ellis suburban life could be, and a man who probably isn't at all similar to the person of the years he's writing about, but could have existed had his life taken another fork. I mean, the book is a gothic ghost story, I suppose, and it partakes of the uncanny and the mysterious and the supernatural. But what grounds it and what makes it really so gossipy and delicious is, like so much of Bret's work, it reads like gossip, and that's what makes it candy to the brain. It does represent a possible path for a person like him. And it's for me a kind of book about authorship. It's a book about what is released into the atmosphere, emotional, cultural, and so on, by the writing and publication of stories. And it's also about the confusion that results in an author's mind and life when his work and his biography are conflated and overtake one another. It's really a kind of nightmare for all writers, because in this story, the violence and the kind of excess that Bret is famous for leaks into his everyday life and kind of surpasses it.
Yeah, it's I find there's something, like, I guess the description of it is that it's not a haunted house book, it's a person who is haunted in a house.
Right.
And it's all kind of coming back to him. But the strange difference is that there's this, like every other book that he's done, the humor comes from a point of kind of detached irony where it can be ridiculous, or you can have like these set pieces that are very funny if you're objectively looking at them, but they're still quite dark. But this one has he's like a likable, even if he's not the best person, there is this heart to this character where he is like playing the bumbling suburbanite fool, the marijuana t-shirt, just trying to fit in, but he feels like he's given a raw deal because he's supposed to be a star. It's it has a different heart at the core of it than every book before this.
Well, I imagine this book was published in 2005, 2006, right around there.
Mhm.
And at this point in Bret's career, he had been the bad boy and the kind of Patrick Bateman of fiction for a long time. And it's sort of, for me, a cry for his own humanity after an argument for his own humanity after probably being dehumanized in his publicity and in the press around him for many years. It's wait, I'm a person. The author of American Psycho is a complex, feeling, vulnerable individual. And so it's me, Bret. For me, it's Bret standing up mid-career for his own all too human, suffering true self. But of course, it's not his true self. It's a construction. It reminds me a little of Bob Dylan's album, John Wesley Harding, when Bob Dylan, having been the enfant terrible of rock and roll, retires to Woodstock and has kids and wants only to be left alone and gets in a motorcycle accident. For me, this is Bret's John Wesley Harding.
Yeah, and it's and it's also like a tribute to his where everything came from, in a way. Like it's talking about his relationship with his father, which I believe on his podcast he said he doesn't know a successful man who doesn't have a difficult relationship with their father. And so as an artist, he's got this inspiration from his father, but it's also about the things that made him from his childhood. You have the monsters coming back from his childhood, but you also have Stephen King, which would be for a young reader at that time, especially when he was growing up. Like Stephen King was kind of the pop writer, what it meant to be a writer, what it meant to be kind of on the fringe in a way, but also popular, covering transgressive topics and things like that. Like this is an ode to how an artist becomes an artist in a lot of ways, it seems like.
Yeah, and it's a book about, and in this sense, it's almost unique in Bret's oeuvre or his collected works. It's a book about children. It's a book about his inner child, as you say, his relationship with his father. And it's set around the ultimate child's holiday, Halloween. But in it, he also has relationships with children in his family, and for me, the savage part of this book is the portrayal of all these psychopharmaceutically altered young children suburbs. At one point he talks about a party at which they're all so lackadaisical and haggard due to their overconsumption of drugs prescribed by their parents and psychiatrists. And you can
That's not
always
even a party. That's the rehearsal for the party.
That's right. That's right. You're right. And one thing that Bret does so well is he exaggerates trends in everyday life to the point where they truly become horrifying. And more than the murders and the ghosts and the hauntings, what's horrifying in this book is his portrayal of suburban life. It's at least as scary as any Gothic element in the book to think that all these kids are on Lexapro and Adderall and Zyprexa and whatever it all is. So it is for me a book about youth. It's a book about his students, his putative students at Camden College, or not Camden, another college.
Yeah.
It postulates a Bret Easton Ellis as a sort of avuncular parental character, which is terrifying in itself. I mean, but also endearing, as you say. And those are the poles of the book. It's a book about a very haunted youngish man who's almost facing middle age prematurely in this book. He's really not that old, not compared to what I think about middle age. But all the chickens are coming home to roost. The chickens, the bloody headless chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah, and he says that it's a homage to Stephen King, and obviously afterwards he noticed there's comparisons to The Dark Half, stuff like that, just within the text. But what, like you were saying, there is this within the Western, like American fiction canon, there is this whole area of like the campus professor sex, like suburbanite middle-aged comedies. Like you have Philip Roth, John Updike, and this scene, and even the scene in Lunar Park when he starts driving away and then turns around and comes back, like that's Rabbit Run. He's kind of answering throughout his books. There is like, he kind of is inserting himself into all the different areas of the American canon. Like the Glamorama, you have the political thriller. And then before, like even his first book has reminiscence of, Huckleberry Finn when it comes to the main character Clayton in Less Than Zero choosing not to merge, not to join the group, and to say no to something, or at least stand up slightly. Well, I don't know. It just seems like there's from a fiction point of view, it's trying to like say, I'm not just the one aesthetic. I have options. Yeah.
The writer that comes to mind when I read this book is John Cheever. Cheever, the famously bisexual, famously dissatisfied, double life saddled American alcoholic writer. Updike is a version of Cheever to me. He's, Cheever and Richard Yates are really to me the bottom line sad poets of the suburbs, and Bret really successfully grapples with those literary ghosts in the book.
Yeah,
and one thing I want to say for him as a writer in general is he's my favorite kind of literate writer. He hides his sources. He hides his idols. He doesn't parade his learning, which is great, or his reading, which is wide. He fully absorbs it in the Bret Easton Ellis universe. And so here we have the Bret Easton Ellis universe taking on, if in a way American Psycho takes on The Great Gatsby and books about, young, achieving, status mad people.
Yeah.
This is a book that takes on, things like the Wop Shot Chronicles or the Rabbit novels, as you say, or whatever. And his picture, his picture of the trapped suburban male is as funny, terrifying, and depressing as any that came before it.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's something about the way he, like, if we talk about minimalism in writing and things like that, after reading Lunar Park, I was looking through the academic kind of discussions about it. Like, had anyone written any papers? What has it been compared to? And of course, these are, because of the way academia has gone with literature, it's usually critical theory or something like this, but there's been a lot of comparisons to the metafictional stuff with Paul Auster.
Right.
But when you read that stuff, it's like you said, those writers, when they're being playful, when they want to show you how smart they are, how playful they are, they hit you on the head with what they've been reading or who their idols are. Like you'll get the mention of Montaigne, you'll get the mention of this one or that one. They'll quote directly from books because they're trying to kind of win you over with authority. But Bret doesn't seem to do that in any of his novels. And all of a sudden it just kind of clicks where you're like, oh, he's doing this, or this is what he's commenting on. And that's something I think what makes all of his books kind of apart from being just metafictional or just, not just being a playful book. They always have this richness to them because you have to dig deeper yourself.
Yeah. This book also reminds me of Roth's The Counter Life.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure when that was published, but I'd be surprised if it wasn't an influence, a conscious influence here. I also get the feeling that, Bret's books invite a kind of voyeuristic gaze. He takes you into his house almost as though you're a security camera. You get to see what's happening behind the bathroom door, before he comes out fully dressed in the day. And so he's playing with the notion of fame here, and he's constantly undercutting it. We're told in the beginning that Bret is probably even more famous than he was at the time. He's experiencing the fame, so it's more intense for him than it would be for an onlooker. But he sets himself up at the beginning as a guy who's making untold amounts of money, who is having breakdowns and druggy episodes that are Hunter Thompson-esque, and who's known everywhere, and so by exaggerating those aspects of his being, we then feel like we're sort of seeing dirty secrets all through the book. His invitation to us to look at the dark side of fame, and the dark side of literary fame in particular, which is a peculiar kind of fame. His wife is a movie star in the book, but I've got to say, she's a little bit, for a lot of the book, she's a little bit marginal.
Mm-hmm.
He's very involved. So he's had problems relating to the wife. He's having problems with their intimate relationship. And sort of only Bret could write a book about being married to a super desirable movie star who's incredibly sexually alluring and so on. But he's mostly concerned, with his own digestion and his secret trips to the bathroom for top-ups of cocaine and so on. And she's kind of a tragic character in the book.
Yeah. She's a dream supportive wife in a lot of ways. She just wants him to succeed.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. And I also, for all the difficult things he has to say about his relationship with his father, here he is reproducing it in the book, which is a very honest and searing revelation about life, that we can, it's called the Harry Chapin Cats in the Cradle revelation. We can understand our own father's faults, and yet we have difficulty compensating for them with our own children. And that's very honest, and winning.
Yeah. Do you think that because he did these emails that he gets, where he gets these videos, like you said, and it's just this camera coming into the house of his father when his father's dying, is this kind of like, because he does think like this, he imagines worlds like this where he's there. Is this a way of him understanding his father? I think like you said, he is reproducing his father's behavior, but you're getting to see it from the other side, and maybe he's getting to see it from the other side for the first time.
Yeah. Well, one thing I admire about Bret's work, and I admire it as a writer because I have difficulty reproducing that effect in my own work. In fact, I don't think I could, is this kind of cold cinematic doubling that he's able to do. He really is able to both participate in his stories, especially this one where he's the titular character, and stand off from them with this horrifying icy distance. And in the sense that this is a book about doppelgangers, as all Gothic fiction really is. I mean, to put on my lit crit hat here, what psychological and Gothic fiction is really about, and cinema, movies like the Black Swan or whatever, is the double, the shadow self, the unexpressed or the suppressed. And I don't want to spoil this book for people, because in some ways this is a Stephen King novel. It's got suspense, it's got monsters, it's got buried sins that come up and explain the predicaments of the present. And so to not look at it in a way as a masterful piece of pop fiction on top of a piece of literary fiction is to miss its pleasures. You want to know what happens in this book. It's not like some of Bret's earlier books. GLAMORAMA has a lot of plot too, but some of Bret's earlier books are evocations of scenes and moods and so on. Stuff happens here, and we, the reader, in the way we are when we read a Stephen King novel, are really gripped with a need to solve puzzles. And he did some pretty good puzzle making here. I got to hand it to him, for a guy for whom that isn't his chief occupation as a fiction writer.
Yeah, I think so. And then without, I guess, we won't spoil all the mysteries and things, but most of the people watching this are supposed to have read it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because it's they've had weeks. I've announced it. They're supposed to have read it, but I'm sure most of them haven't. That's we get a lot of that, but that's normal. But I think the ending here, it's like a very there's just so much. Oh, sorry, the internet's freezing. There you go. There's so much going on with the ending here that how did you respond?
Yeah.
Like I have this, I just remember I was reading Gore Vidal's Point-to-Point Navigation, and there was a point in it where they were he's talking about, someone, or maybe it might have been not even there, but it is about when he realized that he's not going to have children. And this might not be a real regret, but it is something in life that you can miss and not happen. And then so this ending has like this kind of rich, like he realizes his relationship with his father. It's kind of an understanding of it, but then the idea of creation, or your work, your life's work as your child as well, like creating a child that he can always visit between the pages of Lunar Park is something that he does have that, but he does not have an actual son. And there's, I don't know, there's something about playing with this where it becomes, again, out of nowhere, this puzzling, funny, kind of ridiculous memoir that becomes poignant at times, and then it ends with this thing where you never know if is it a lament or is it or I don't know what it is. I don't understand the ending exactly when I mean the sentiment behind it, even though I think I understand the directions it makes you think.
You mean you don't understand whether it's an unhappy or a happy ending, essentially?
Yeah, that's what I think. But because there's so much heart in this, and there's a lot of heartbreak and all this sort of stuff. But this, I don't know what he really feels, and I think that's the point of him in a way. Is he has this? He wants to be playful. He wanted to work with the memoir because the memoir has this kind of automatic emotional response by the reader, and it's very popular. People love this sort of stuff because, like you said, it's juicy and it's gossipy. And that's where he can kind of play with authority, which is something he's doing right now with his audiobook, The Shards. He's playing with the authority of being a podcast person, where people are used to him interviewing guests and meaning what he says, and then not knowing when does it become Bret the storyteller and when is it Bret the interviewer, journalist type thing. So I don't know. This ending is, I like it. I've been thinking about it, for over a week now since I've reread it. And I don't know if he's happy or sad or if that's too binary of a way of looking at it, or I don't know. What do you think about the ending?
I think that it's a happy, tragic ending in the sense that it synthesizes two very difficult truths about life. One is that it's brief and wiped away, and the other that art can somehow transcend the mere biological existence. He brings those two truths into relationship without preferring one over the other, without giving us an answer. But it seems that he illuminates his own motives and his own self in a way I don't think he does in any other book. I don't see it. And so it's bittersweet. It's profound. It speaks to the hopes and of the artist to sort of get beyond, but it throws it into question as well. Bret's always aware of his own vanity in books and of vanity in general, and I think that might be his great theme. He criticizes vanity, he criticizes status seeking, he criticizes the desire for fame, he criticizes ambition in his books, but he also seems to suggest there's no alternative to them. And so here I think you have the basis of your book club discussion. And I also think that what was Bret's next book after this? You can remind me of
Imperial Bedrooms, the sequel to Less Than Zero.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had the happy duty to review Bret's books over the years. I gave a terrible review to The Animation. I gave a good review to GLAMORAMA, which I think is an epic and wonderful masterpiece, really. And I think I reviewed Imperial Bedroom somewhere, which I really liked a lot. I saw it get a lot of flack as somehow a redo or a secondary version of Less Than Zero, but I liked it at least as much as Less Than Zero myself. And I remember the ending of that book where he says, I didn't like people. I forget what he says. There's a confessional last line.
Yeah. Oh, I can grab it.
Yeah. What is it? Read it to me.
Okay.
And compare it to the very end of this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it says the fades, the dissolves, the rewritten scenes, all the things you wipe away. I now want to explain these things to her, but I know I never will. The most important one being, I never liked anyone and I'm afraid of people.
I love that. For some reason that hit me so hard, you know. And then if you read this, so if you should see my son, tell him I say hello. Be good, that I am thinking of him and that I know he's watching over me somewhere, and not to worry, that he can always find me here whenever he wants, right here, my arms held out and waiting in the pages, behind the covers, at the end of Lunar Park. Now, that sounds very different than what you just read. It sounds hopeful, optimistic.
Yeah.
You know, Daddy will always be here. It's almost like saying God will always be watching over you. Just look up at the, you know, look up at the clouds, and here I am. And yet, I think that this ending is a cover for a pessimistic ending. Frankly, I think that the frank sort of pessimism and bitterness that comes at the end of Imperial Bedrooms is being covered up here. That ending is almost a little bit like a greeting card, and knowing Bret and his irony, it sounds false on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm just like, oh, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've written an ending like that in the book Up in the Air. I have a guy at the very end of his maybe his life, speaking to his own voicemail because he doesn't have any friends, and saying, we've made it, you know, because the only greeting he can get from the world is the one on his own answering machine at home. This is back in 2001. And I sort of feel that way about that ending, or this ending in Lunar Park, that it's a sort of whistling past the graveyard, false, upbeat ending. It's also a message to himself. That's who I think that's who he's talking to when he talks about his son.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah,
and this is like, and that is a big thing with this book, is that the metafictional elements that he brings into this, like after you have this kind of intertextual thing that goes on since Rules of Attraction opens up the Bret Easton Ellis universe, you have characters that are coming in and out of Bret's work that are part of this big world he's building. And then in this book, of course, he realizes he's in control of the universe, so he can get rid of Patrick Bateman, so he no longer has to infect the rest of his work in any way. But this is also about making physical books, like you talked about at the beginning of the interview here. He's talking about what it means to be an author, and this is about writing, and it's also about making a physical book, because I wanted to bring this up because it's a good opportunity, and because you were willing to be on the live stream. You have this great new Substack newsletter where you're trying to kind of do there's a big gap in it now. This used to be what the big writers would do before, where they'd have this mixture of literary criticism and politics and history, so that you could have these essays on ideas that people would talk about. And you don't see that as much. Like Norman Mailer, Gore Vidal, that sort of writing about literature and its place in the world. And you have this in your newsletter. And your last newsletter, if anyone is watching, I recommend subscribing to his Substack, was about the magic of books. And I was wondering, like, this book could not be a digital book. I don't think Lunar Park works if you can just click away and realize that it's, what's false, what's real. The whole thing is that it's between these two covers, and you have to be in that world and kind of believe it contextually in order to really have an aesthetic response to it.
So this is my thesis about physical books over electronic books. When you hear the debate or the argument over which is superior, the issue is usually framed as, I love the feeling of a book. I like the reading experience. But I don't think that's what makes a physical book unique as a artistic object. It's that it's physical, and that it moves around through space like we do, that we can find it on a shelf, that we can walk into a junk store and pick up a book at random. See, electronic books are only there when you call them. They're your servant. You don't find them. You don't come across them. You don't stare at them across the room on the shelf and think, will I open that? Or have memories of having read it.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't children that grow up and walk about the world the way a physical book does, you know. And if there's a metaphor or an allegory in Lunar Park, it's that between the physical book and the child. And so making a book and then setting it out loose in the world for people to pick up, read, find, serendipitously find among another stack of books is very different than creating a PDF file that people then hear about, call for, and like you say, inspect versus other computerized artifacts. Like you say in this book, if you were to have a hyperlinked text and you could find out what's real and what's not, it would ruin the thing. It would ruin its spirit. So the magic of books is that they're like people. You can bump into them at random. You can have experience sort of synchronicity with them, and they're mysterious. They have a look and a feel. They're ships in bottles, and they're not just texts sitting out in some electronic potential form for you to subscribe to or whatever. And so it is their objecthood. You know, how can I put it? If you put a person's brain into a computer, if you downloaded all the information in their brain, you wouldn't have the person. The person has to be able to walk around and be seen and so on, and have an adventure. And a book has an adventure in the world. And you know, at the end of Lunar Park, it's like he's saying goodbye to his ship in a bottle, or he's putting it up on the shelf. You know, he's saying, here, I've made something. You can come to it. And that's just not true of this kind of cyberspace web of bytes and, you know, imagery that appears on a screen. So anyway, the magic of a book also is that it finds the reader and the reader finds it. I can never know when I walk out during the day if I might be confronted by a book in a store, lying on a coffee table, on the shelf behind you. You know what I mean? As I look at you over this connection, I see physical books behind you, each of which has a presence and one which might grab me. There's no way that ebooks can do that. I can't see it. I can't see an array of ebooks standing behind you like individuals commenting on your presence.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Well, hey, this has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for coming on to the live stream. This is great.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
By this time, Jane had moved out of Los Angeles and into the anonymous suburbia of the Northeast, close enough to New York for meetings and business, but at the same time safely distant from what she saw was the increasing horror of urban life. The attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon was the initial motivation, and Jane briefly considered some exotically remote place deep in the Southwest, or the vastness of the heartland. But her goal eventually simplified itself into moving at least 2 hours away from a large city, since that's where suicide bombers were blowing themselves up in crowded Burger Kings and Starbucks and Walmarts and in subways at rush hour. Miles of major cities had been cordoned off behind barbed wire, and morning newspapers ran aerial photographs of bombed-out buildings on the front page, showing piles of tangled bodies in the shadow of the crane lifting slabs of scorched concrete. More and more often, there were no survivors. Bulletproof vests were on sale everywhere because scores of snipers had suddenly appeared. The military police stationed on every corner had offered no solace, and surveillance cameras proved useless. There were so many faceless enemies, from within the country and abroad, that no one was certain who we were fighting or why. Cities had become mournful places, where everyday life was suddenly interrupted by jagged mounds of steel and glass and stone, and grief on an unimaginable scale was rising up over them, reinforced by the stained, tattered photocopies of the missing posted everywhere, which not only a constant reminder would have been lost, but also a warning of what was coming next, and an endless CNN montages of people wandering around in a slow-motion daze, some wrapped in American flags, while the soundtrack was Bruce Springsteen softly singing, "We Shall Overcome." There were too many fearful moments where the living envied the dead, and people started moving away to the country, the suburbs, anywhere. Cities were no place to raise a family, or, more poignantly according to Jane, start one. So many people had lost their capacity for love. Jane wanted to raise gifted, disciplined children, driven to succeed, but she was fearful of just about everything. The threat of pedophiles, bacteria, SUVs. We owned one. Guns, pornography, and rap music. Refined sugar, ultraviolet rays, terrorists, ourselves. I took anger management sessions and went over past wounds with a therapist after a brief and heated exchange concerning Robbie popped up in an otherwise innocuous conversation between the two of us. It was all about what he wanted. It was all about what he needed. Everything I desired was overwritten, and I had to accept this. I had to rise up to it. I spent that summer trying to get to know this worried, sad, alert boy who gave evasive answers to questions I felt demanded clarity and precision. And also Sarah, who is now 6 and basically just kept informing me of how bored she was by everything. Since camp had been canceled, Jane and I organized activities to push them out of their stupor. The karate class, the oboe lesson, the phonics tapes, the smart toys, the trip to the wax museum, the aquarium we visited. The summer was saying no to Robbie, who considered himself a professional video game player, because he wanted to fly to Seoul for the World Cyber Games. The summer was getting acquainted with the wide array of meds the kids were on. Stimulants, mood stabilizers, the antidepressant Lexapro, the Adderall for attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, and various other anticonvulsants and antipsychotics that had been prescribed. The summer was building a fort. It was decorating cookies. It was a silver robot I purchased for Robbie, to which he responded, "I'm too old, Bret." It was the astronomy CD-ROM he wanted instead. It was the summer of the trampoline I bought and the minor injury Robbie sustained while attempting a stunt. We went for walks through a forest. We took nature hikes. I can't believe I actually toured both a farm and a chocolate factory, and also petted a giraffe, who was later killed by lightning after a freak summer storm, at the local zoo. I became reacquainted with Snuffleupagus. The summer was colors and shapes, and counting with Sarah, who could say, "Hola." And there was always the blue dog and the friendly dragon and the puppet shows where the animals interacted suggestively with one another. And I would read The Pokey Little Puppy to her on CD-ROM, which made the book seem cold and barren, the illustrations staring at us from the empty glow of a computer screen. It all seemed vaguely unreal to me. I was thrust into the role of husband and father, of protector, and my doubts were mountainous. But I was moving with a higher purpose. I was involuntarily striving towards something. I took a more commanding tone with the children when they were acting surly or indifferent or spoiled, which seemed to relieve Jane. But Jane also requested that I stay focused, and so I easily secured a position as a creative writing teacher at the local college, even if the group of students met only once a week for 3 hours. I found myself changing, and had no choice but to feel that the conversion validated me. I no longer craved action. The tightness of city life vanished. The suburbs were fragmented and rambling. There was no more flipping through the devil's dictionary, Zagat's, to find a decent restaurant, and the bidding war for reservations disappeared. Who cared about VIP booth anymore, or mugging for paparazzi on the red carpet at movie premieres? I was relaxed in the suburbs. Everything was different. The rhythm of the days, your social status, suspicions about people. It was a refuge for the less competitive. It was the minor leagues. You simply didn't have to pay as much attention to things. The precise pose was no longer required. I had expected to be bored and angered by that boredom, but it never materialized. Passing by someone pruning a shrub did not spark the powder keg of regret I expected. I had canceled my subscription to I Want That, and for a while, I was okay. One day in late August, I drove by a simple field dotted with poplars, and I suddenly held my breath. I felt a tear on my face. I was happy, I realized with amazement. But by the end of that summer, everything I learned started to disappear. The problems that developed within the house over the next 2 months actually began late in October and hit crisis point in November. Everything collapsed in a time frame made up of 12 days.
That was another great reading from Lunar Park by Colden Martin. Thank you, Colden, for doing that. Now we're here live in Reykjavik at the Secret Cellar on Leikagata 6A. If anyone's planning to come visit Iceland anytime soon, you can come visit us here. We're open every day. You know, well, actually, no, Wednesday to Saturday. I don't know why I said every day, but here I have a guest with me. You've been on the live stream quite a few times for a number of books, and now you're back again. This is Mette Kuschel, the sociologist and stand-up comedian.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no problem. This is a different book than all the I think all the other ones we've read, and it's the one thing that really stands out for me right off the bat is the first chapter. Once you jump in, how funny this book is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I did have some doubts in the beginning whether is this true. I had to Google Bret Easton Ellis' son, and then I was like, oh no, it's a Bret Easton Ellis book.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not true. I feel this way. I feel the way about this book and the whole. I've been thinking a lot about the whole the works in the life of the universe of the Bret Easton Ellis books up until now. And the way I feel about this book is, so the first couple books we read, they were sort of, as they had in the beginning, long stretches of book and long stretches of text where it was really just kind of, you had to kind of get through it. And it was kind of hypnotic. It was important, necessary for the book. I feel that way about, and then you got to some action.
Yeah.
And I feel the way, and that's how I feel about these books now, whereas we had to sort of almost get through the first couple of books, which were important and necessary, in order to get to the good stuff. And the good stuff is GLAMORAMA, and it's this book.
Yeah, okay.
And then I feel the way, and like in GLAMORAMA, I said that I could do without the last 2 chapters.
Right.
And then the last 2 chapters, I could do without them. And then I wanted, what was the ending then? I wanted that to be the ending.
Oh, technical difficulties.
Hello.
Okay.
And then I'm happy. I want this. I'm happy for this to be the ending of this universe now.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping I like Imperial Bedrooms.
Yeah.
I'm worried I won't. I'm worried I'll be like, okay, this is enough.
This is enough.
Yes.
Well, it is like a different sort of style than all the other ones. So this is like like I said many times throughout all these interviews, it's like this reverse engineering. But I'm not sure if I'm really correct on that. It just seems like Bret took all the stuff that he was doing, all of his aesthetics throughout every book, and the numbness as a feeling, and all this sort of stuff. And then he was like, I can also do the opposite.
Yeah.
And
Or he can take that into different genres and make it look like something else, but it's really the same thing.
Yeah. And so what did when you read this, what was the things that stuck out the most for you? Was it? Like with the horror elements, I thought it was great the way the house was changing and everything like that. And then it turned out it was more of a haunted person than a haunted house, which is how people describe it. It's like it's a person who's haunted rather than a place.
Well, same with the poltergeist, right? Because it attaches to one person, but it affects the whole house.
And what did you think about the characters coming back in? Like all of a sudden, Patrick Bateman is out in the suburbs committing murders again.
How do I feel about it? That's a good question. I don't know that I feel anything about it.
No.
I think that's expected. That's to be expected from a Bret Easton Ellis novel. Because it is within the same universe, and then he just writes the character of Bret Easton Ellis into the universe.
Right.
So of course it's going to be recurring characters.
Yeah, but there was something kind of like when it was Patrick Bateman, it's like a phantom, and you can realize it's a character. But then Donald Kimball, the detective from American Psycho, just shows up.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's when I was starting to be like, what is really happening in this? Because it's not really a ghost anymore. Now characters are just popping up, and of course the neighbors from Rules of Attraction, like we said, Mitchell Allen.
Yeah.
It's always like it's never exactly what you expect. When you think he's going to pull back, he pushes forward, and when you think he's going to push forward, it pulls back. And so I don't know. There's something about this that every part of it had a kind of double meaning to me the whole time.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And so, when you read through this one, is there any part that you didn't like? Because you're always the guest who has you always know what you don't like in these things.
Nothing sprung to mind. It's that's more to do with language, because this is the first book this time around that I read in Danish, and there was just two things that really annoyed me, because part of what's so important about Bret Easton Ellis novels is language, right? So reading it in a translation, that just takes something away from me, for me personally. I think he did a good job, the guy who translated it, but there's two errors that I just find so annoying, because it shows that the translator has missed the context of it's literally just two words, a word in one sentence and a word in a sentence on the next page, that he just completely misunderstood what they're supposed to mean. Because with Bret, he places so much importance on what does this word mean in this context? You need to know the context. Do you want to hear the examples?
Yeah, I'd like to hear the examples.
Okay, so the first one is with Robbie, where Bret is the character Bret is looking at his son. And I'm going to try and direct translate it into English.
Okay.
So it's on page 116 in my book, where Robbie's trying to start this astronomy club, but the idea nothing came of the idea, because none of his peers were interested. And this is the sentence that annoys me. And his favorite songs always had the word fly in the title. Yeah. Where obviously fly is, in this context, is like fly for a white guy. Fly, right?
Yeah.
But it's translated as to fly.
Oh, I see.
I was like, don't you get it? That annoys me, because you need to know, context is very important to me.
Yeah. There's always, I think when they have these translations, especially like you said, someone he's an English language prose stylist writer.
Yeah, it's language driven, not necessarily plot driven.
Yeah. But this one has quite a bit of plot. Yeah. And did you feel the horror elements? Did you actually feel like there was a creepiness or a scariness to this book, or because of the metafictional elements, did you feel a little bit distanced?
No, I found it creepy. I was into it.
Yeah.
And to me, I have a very deep-rooted fear of the suburbs. Well, because I grew up in a suburb, so just right off the bat, it's scary for me, because I'm just sort of in this horror version of the suburbs. Yeah. The course that where I first dealt with American Psycho was about consumerism in the U.S. Yeah. And I did my paper for that course was about Suburbs, and so I used American Beauty and Edward Scissorhands to sort of explore the metaphor of the suburbs.
Yeah, the creepy kind of cookie cutter neighborhoods.
Exactly.
Where it's so clean that well, I guess there's the filmmaker, David Lynch.
Yeah.
He has this, like, there's something going on underneath it. Like at the
Exactly.
beginning of Blue Velvet, you go down to the dirt and the worms are there.
Yeah.
And it is kind of ominous because it's too, clean.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the control that I don't like, the social control.
Right, yeah.
And the uniformity that's sort of imposed on everyone.
Right, and
Scary.
it's a weird thing.
Yes.
Everyone who's here, Meta's here with me. You can put the comments up onto the screen. I know people have been following along. I've been getting quite a few great comments with this. I even got a private message where a person told me that they can give me the 411 on Lunar Park, and that it's actually all true.
Okay.
Which that is amazing if that's the case. But maybe they mean like true in the sense of like the emotions behind what Bret was writing.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's something there. Also, because we have the comments up, and please do feel free to comment along so we can answer with you and talk back and forth. But we do have a special guest joining you and me.
Ooh.
Yeah. So. This is someone who is one of the producers of the live stream. He's in Virginia right now, and he's also the wonderful voice from all the readings. This Colden Martin. Colden, are you there? Can I talk?
Yes, I'm here. Hey. What's going on?
Hey,
hello.
How are you?
Good to see y'all. Good discussions thus far.
Yeah, I thought it's been a really good. It's a really kind of easy to talk about book, and you don't really get. Kind of like it never becomes obsessive in one area. You kind of want to go over the whole thing, even though it's weird that none of us have mentioned the Turby yet.
That's actually why I'm here. Is to really break that down. Since Walter Kern basically expanded upon, from what I can gather, almost everything about the book, we really haven't cracked that egg.
Yeah. What did you think about the? I like it. I think it's just a fun thing to have a toy that's coming to life or it's possessed and everything like that.
I like the absurdity of this cute little toy. One thing that ruined it for me was the why Bret. I get that it's supposed to be like within this genre.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be like and it all ties back into it. But I didn't.
Okay.
I thought it was a bit cheesy.
I remember, York, when you and I were talking about this book originally, was that how, compared to the books, that were set in like the mid to late 80s, like this is a time that we like very, very much remember very clearly, you and me do.
Yeah, exactly.
And like when I kept thinking about, the early 2000s and like the whole Furby craze that was happening, and I don't know if that was international, but in North America it was insane. And imagining that coming to life, because everyone was creeped out by those things anyway. I know it was, the book goes deeper into it being, sort of from Bret's childhood, and it's a different type of critter, but that just felt like one of the cool consumer aspects of kind of mocking that early 2000s culture that I loved about this.
In my head it was a Furby as well, even though it's described as a bird, but
I
kept picturing.
I couldn't get it out of my head, or the Furby's strange robotic voice.
The mechanical mouth just going.
I can feel it.
Clearly Furbies were the central trauma of our childhood.
That's definitely. I'm still traumatized by it.
I didn't even have one, but no, they're just imprinted in me as
so
an object of terror.
I don't know, because you haven't been listening to the Shards.
I have not.
The Shards, and this is something that was brought up that I kind of want to bring into this discussion. And Colden, you might have a view on this. There's been a idea that the Shards is a prequel to Lunar Park.
Huh.
This is an idea. What do you think about this idea?
There's a lot of Shards theories flying around right now, and it's really inspiring to see in a way, especially because of the unique format of the serialized experience. But I don't think I'm ready to necessarily make that type of
Yeah.
declaration yet. I mean, if anything, though, one thing that I think has been the through line through everybody's discussion about this book tonight and on the Patreon and in the Facebook group is just this emotional vulnerability that, it's hard to call it fully sincere, or it's still wrapped up in that style. I think everybody's been trying to juggle with that tonight of like, wait a minute, how sentimental is this really supposed to be? And the shards in Lunar Park share that flavor a little bit, where I think all of us are sort of wrestling with, whoa, wait a minute, the Ice King there of California is getting really raw and kind of making me cry. It's very, very easy, I think, to see the parallel, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think, I guess, because just to keep it kind of on the Lunar Park thing, I think there is something about this obsession with how these forms control the audience. So there is this, so you feel this sentimentality in this book that you don't feel in the other ones, but that's what memoirs are. I don't know how many memoirs you have to read about starlets or depressed comedians where there's some reveal about something and you go, oh, it's all this, it's all that, and it's made to that form, and then so for him to manipulate you using this is what that's what I get excited with this book, is that you have an ending where I'm still like, oh, I think he's giving us kind of what we want, because everyone wants someone to say something like this, and so he can twist it with you and play with you a little bit. It's been so fascinating to hear. I mean, the two of you and almost every guest kind of wrestling with what the final few pages really do to us. It's pretty fascinating in that way. Bret's always famous for his endings. This one really takes it.
What do you think Lunar Park is?
Gosh,
I had this. I thought maybe Lunar Park was supposed to be the next significant thing, sort of where Camden College has been sort of the recurring theme until now. I was going to say not a huge important part necessarily in every book. It was, of course, in Rules of Attraction. But I thought maybe Lunar Park was going to be the next thing that sort of, it's just always there.
Right.
It's connected. It's the next thing that's going to connect all the characters.
Yeah. That's the thing that pulls them. But I still don't know what is it supposed to represent as a place or a thing? And I don't know what is it.
Yeah, is it a place? Is it a thing? What is it?
But it must be tied to the childhood and him as a kid. There's something about him wanting to start an astronomy club, and he's got these posters in his room, and then Lunar Park is like a place that you go to or a feeling. I'm not sure. It's an interesting name, and it's funny when you look it up on Google. I think there's a place called Luna Park.
In Melbourne,
Yeah, so they just say not, did you mean Luna Park? And you're like, no, I meant Lunar Park.
Yeah, it's an amusement park in a very trendy area of Melbourne.
Okay. So, Colden, I think Lunar Park is simply a ghost story. That's a comment we have from Selena West. Well, that's one way to look at it.
We talked about it with Glamorama. You talked about it in your intro about, how much these are deliberate homages, but how much they take on like a life of their own. And I thought maybe it was Walter Kern that mentioned it, but like a good ghost story or horror stories, I mean, we all devoured all the books, but like this one you could really classify as like a page turner to some extent. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is one where it feels like a different style completely, but then you realize it's a different way to kind of open anything up. Like for him to open up in a new way or to play with us in a new way, he's taking this along. But it is kind of parallel to the shards now, because that's kind of what he's doing there as well. So it's
Meta, did you read this at a different pace than the other ones because of this format? You know, it kind of like, what's happening with all this horrific stuff, or was it did you kind of read it at the same pace as the other books?
I'd say same pace. I definitely wanted to know what happened next. To the same extent, I didn't necessarily have the same desire to read on for that reason with the earlier books. I liked the books and the writing, but with this one I was like, oh, what is gonna happen? Like, what is this thing? I really wanted to get to the end. But in terms of the pace, just practically in my life, it was the same.
Oh, we have a comment here from Thompson, Autolipnosis. Great name. There was a restaurant called Luna Park in LA for a while. It's closed now. Coincidentally, it was very near the Firestone station. That's a central location in Lynch's Lost Highway. Yeah. Okay. That's a nice little tidbit of information. Where do you guys think that the kids are going in Lunar Park? Because they are these missing children, and they're leaving, and then eventually, of course, he leaves as well. And what is this? Is this something that we're missing? Because it is ominous, and it makes you question. But where do you think they're going? If this is like now really being defined as a fictional place, because the ending kind of defines it as these two, as being like it's between the pages of this book, then what are these kids doing? Is this how kids is this how? I don't know. Does anyone have a response to this?
Well, I thought that was sort of going to tie into Lunar Park if that becomes a significant thing. Is that the next sort of group of people we're going to follow is these boys?
These lost boys.
Yeah.
Colden, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's like all of us. Looking at this book through a kind of literalist frame is very, very challenging. And so questions like that sometimes, get me just like looping around in my mind, just because so much of this seems, so rich in metaphor, like what Ryan was saying earlier, you know what I mean? Is that this is just woven through not only this, metafictional deconstruction of a memoir or rewriting history or whatever the way that he put it. It really is also this very, very internalized, raw, emotional reconciliation with pain and loss, and especially about the cycle of the father becoming the son. And so I just, when I think about it being like an actual place, it's really more of that, ethereal realm. I can't think about it. I mean, I love what you're saying about it being in between the books, the pages, the cover to cover, but gosh, I wouldn't even know how to answer the question, really. It's challenging for me.
But also, does it matter where they go? Because it matters that they go for the plot and for Bret to have something to worry about and to actually experience. But after Robbie leaves, the Lost Boys have sort of served their purpose for the plot, and so they're not really necessary anymore.
Oh, we have a comment about this from Trent Allen Smith. Okay. It is like Neverland, a place where you don't have to grow up, avoid adulthood, and the frustration therein, a central theme in most of Bret's work. Have the boys left due to dissatisfaction, or were they taken and will never return? Or is this a place they can go to be successful?
Well, if they're leaving due to dissatisfaction, I think that defeats the purpose of being successful, right? Because that's the whole point of growing up in that place and going to those schools. Is they want to, the parents who choose to raise their kids in that area, they are raising productive, successful people within these parameters that they've established. And so if the boys are leaving due to dissatisfaction, I think that is probably a big reason for them to be dissatisfied.
Yeah, another thing, because I asked you at the beginning when you came on now, and I'll ask you, Colden. Another thing about this book is how funny it is. Like, this is a really, really funny book. And I also like the character that Bret is playing of himself, because if that was really how he was, that would be awesome. If he was just the type of guy who's wearing weed shirts and giving people nicknames and just kind of this outrageous, father character, dad joke thing, where he's going with the Jaster. He's going with the Jaster into the garage to do lines. This is just a completely ridiculous type of character, but very funny and endearing. And you kind of go like, could that? I was thinking like, could I end up being that guy? Is this where I'm gonna go? Because it just seemed to like nail every kind of like weird insecurity about wanting to be something and cool and hip, but a parent. And then you see, of course, the neighbor, which we've talked about a few times, with the other guests. This guy Mitchell Allen, who like covets his neighbor's wife, and he's just one of those guys. He's stuck in the suburbs, and he just has to kind of look around and just be jealous of whatever's around him.
I mean, you're wearing the shirt of a.
Oh yeah. I'm dressed in character for this.
To youth, yeah.
Yeah. Lunar Park, a cautionary tale for all aging men. I'm glad we're talking about the funny stuff, y'all, because we've broken this down from every angle, but like this book is straight up hilarious. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I think, were saying that GLAMORAMA might be kind of the funniest. To me, this is the one that makes me laugh the most. I've told York this. I've told the face group this. For some reason, I don't know why, there's a part in this book that I think is the funniest line in all of Bret's work, and I think about it all the time for some reason, and that's probably says a lot about me, but I don't know. And so it's like they're at the kitchen table, it's toward the beginning of the book, and I think it's like at a breakfast scene, maybe the night after the Halloween party, and like the dog is also one of like the depressed characters in this book, right? Victor, right? That's the dog's name.
Yeah.
At one point, like, it's bothering Bret that this dog like doesn't like him and is really depressed, and he says something like to the effect of like, you know what? I've never seen that dog frolic. Why doesn't that dog frolic? I don't know why, ladies and gentlemen. That is the funniest thing in the world to me. And now every time I see a dog, I question whether or not it's frolicking enough.
Yeah.
And then also too, like the kid popping the Skittles into her mouth, like pills, and she's like, Bret says, "Honey, why are you doing that?" She said, well, that's the way mommy does it when she's looking in the bathroom mirror.
And also the kids sort of performing yoga poses.
Yeah.
I found that odd and funny.
I think all the stuff about childhood was so strangely I thought it was always like a little bit exaggerated, but enough that you're like, oh God, being a kid is such a strange time. In that, especially in that social class, like we've talked about, with the drugs and everything like that, and rehearsal parties, like rehearsals to the party to see which kids will get along.
And then the wildly inappropriate clothes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It comes up with Sarah, where she's at Halloween. She's wearing a shirt that says, "My boyfriend thinks I'm studying."
Yeah.
The whole Halloween sequence is just a master stroke of comedy. Like it is some of the funniest passages. And like you already mentioned, like, I mean, as far as like the things I want to do most in this world, I think partying with the Jaster in the garage is like probably number one now. And like, I know that Jay, I think maybe said on the podcast, wasn't too happy with his appearance with that. Mm-hmm. But I was like, dude, I think it makes you even cooler. And I would really, really love to party with you sometime on a Halloween night in the burbs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well, this has been a kind of a really fun thing, and it's cool that we were able to do this call in from Virginia to have another live guest right here on the live stream. Is there I just want like a few seconds from each of you, a closing, something you feel has been mentioned, or a closing thought on Lunar Park. I find these all funny because as each one happened, as I read each book, starting at less than zero, I always kind of was like, I enjoyed it in some way and really looked into it, like, okay, what am I looking for? How is this? And now, after reading all of these, I can't say which one is my favorite because I just enjoy them in this new way. And Lunar Park kind of cemented that I'm a Bret Easton Ellis fan. I like his writing, and I could go back and read any of the other ones now.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was going to say, is there any final thoughts that you guys have on Lunar Park before we go back to the reading that we missed with you there? Colden, what do you think?
Yeah, this is kind of a simple one, but this was the first new Bret Easton Ellis book that I was ever able to buy after I had read some of the early ones. Like I remember when this came out, and it was really something that I don't think I understood as well until I reread it again recently, compared to all of the other ones. All books are going to change. Your perspective is going to change, as you get older. But this wasn't something that I think I richly felt the first time. And reading it again recently, it was moving in a way that really in all of the other books, it's been great reading them. But I mean, it was an extremely emotional experience as I kind of am starting to reflect on my own childhood and getting older and my relationship with my father. It was really moving. So this was a great experience this time.
Yeah, well, kind of similar to that. This book is what made me realize that Bret Easton Ellis is a contemporary writer. Because in my head, I'm thinking 80s, even GLAMORAMA, which came out in 99, but to me it feels mid-90s. So in my head, it was all just like distant, and it was far away geographically, time-wise. But here they have DVDs, plasma screen TVs. Robbie is computer literate. He knows his way around the internet. Robbie is younger than I am, 2 or 3 years, which really sort of hit home sort of midway through the book. Oh my God, which I had a strange reaction to it, which I don't know. I can't explain that yet. I don't know what that is. Yeah. But it felt really weird for me to realize that this is now, or a decade ago, but
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been Lunar Park. When we've had Walter Kern, we've had Gigi Levangie, we talked to Ryan Leone. This has been something, and everyone there who's commenting, you guys, you can keep commenting where you are and talk to each other and keep this kind of going for as long as you like. I think until the stream ends, and then I don't think you can comment live anymore. I do want to say, because we're at the end of the live stream, that if you want to buy any of these books autographed, it is available at www.breteastonellis.com/bookshop or books, and you can get them there. And a big thank you to Todd Michael Schultz, who put this all together. He's the one who was able to group us all together and kind of organize us so we can get this done. And Colden, thanks for always. And Meta, you're the only in-person guest who keeps coming back.
I'm so tired.
Yeah. It's after 3 a.m. here in Reykjavik, and I think we're ready to shut down. I'll read a last comment. It's his most complex work, in my opinion. So much is at play, but ultimately about fathers and sons. I gave it as a gift to my father. We've always struggled communicating. Well, that's a nice way. That's a nice comment to end on. Guys, we're gonna put the first reading, Colden, because we cut it off And you can't do all that work for it not to be seen. So we're going to put the first reading on, but then it's going to shut down. This is it. Thank you guys. I hope everyone who tuned in from all around that you guys had a good time. And yeah, we'll see you at the next live stream number 7, Imperial Bedrooms. Yeah. Good night.
See ya. Buy your dad Lunar Park.
Buy your dad Lunar Park. See you, Colden.
I woke up in Milan. I woke up in Singapore. I woke up in Moscow. I woke up in Helsinki. I woke up in Cologne. I woke up in various cities along the eastern seaboard. I woke up cradling a bottle of tequila in a white limo with bullhorns attached to its front fender as it raced across Texas. Why did Bret miss the reading? Paul Bogards was constantly asked by the press. After a pause, Paul would answer with his now customary vagueness. Fatigue. A new tack. Why did Bret postpone the whole leg of the tour? Another long pause before. Allergies. Then a longer pause before the confused journalist tentatively mentioned, "But it's January, Mr. Bogards." Finally, after another drawn-out pause on Bogards' part, in a small voice, "Fatigue." This was followed by yet another very long pause, and then in barely a whisper, "Food poisoning." The people were making so much money, there was enough pornography and dismemberment to appease my fan base, so the book was on just about every bestseller list, despite reviews that usually ended with the word yuck, that schedules were inevitably readjusted, because if they weren't, my publisher would suffer huge financial losses. Everything about my career was now measured in economics, and giant bouquets of flowers had to be sent to my hotel suites in order to soothe my insecurity rages. Every hotel on the GLAMORAMA World Tour was required to provide 10 votive candles, a box of chewable vitamin C tablets, an assortment of Ricola throat lozenges, fresh ginger root, 3 large bags of Cool Ranch Doritos, a chilled bottle of Cristal, and an unlisted outgoing-only phone line. And at all readings, the lights above the podium had to be orange-tinted, because this would bring out the darkness of my salon-induced tan. If these contractual demands weren't met, the fine would be split between Knopf and myself. No one said being a Bret Easton Ellis fan was easy. An actual drug cop was hired for the second U.S. tour. Somehow during all this, the paperback had been published. I had been on the road that long. Terrence had slipped out of the picture months ago, and a fresh-faced young woman, motivational helper, or celebrity babysitter, or sober companion, or whatever, was now on hand to basically make sure I didn't snort heroin before the readings. But of course she was hired to protect my publisher, not me. They didn't really care about the underlying reasons of my addiction, but then neither did I, and we were only interested in the amount of book sales the tour was generating. I thought I was fragile, yet functioning. But according to memos the drug cop emailed to Knopf's publicity department from the road, I was most decidedly not functioning. Email memo number 6. 15 miles southwest of Detroit, Ryder was found hiding in back of a stalled van on the median of a divided highway, picking at non-existent scabs. Email memo number 9. Somehow Ryder has been tear gassed at an anti-globalization demonstration in Chicago. Email memo number 13. Berkeley. Angry drug dealer was found choking Ryder due to lack of payment in alley behind Barnes & Noble. Email memo number 18. Cleveland. Ryder slept until 3 p.m., missing all morning and lunch interviews. Was then found pigging out on junk food until compelled to throw up. Also witnessed standing in front of hotel mirror sobbing, "I'm getting so old." Email memo number 27. Ryder allegedly encouraged a Doberman pinscher to perform cunnilingus on unconscious groupie and when said animal failed to show interest in said groupie, writer punched said animal in head and was severely bitten. Email memo number 34. Miami Book Fair. Writer locked himself in bookstore bathroom, repeatedly yelling at concerned employees to go away. When writer emerged an hour later, he started to freak out again. I have a snake on me, writer screamed. It's biting me. It's in my mouth. Writer was dragged to a waiting squad car while holding on to a bewildered young yeshiva student attending the reading, whom writer continuously fondled and groped until ambulance arrived. His eyes rolling back into his head, writer's last words, shouted, before being driven off were, quote, I am keeping the Jew boy, unquote. Paul Bogarts would respond with his own emails, such as, I don't care if you have to stick a broom up writer's ass to get him upright and on stage, just do it. I felt as if I'd been hijacked. The tour seemed so long and monstrously unfair. I kept fainting from the endless pressure of it all. Wellbutrin helped me cope, along with my refusal to admit anything was wrong. My handler was now calling the tour a legitimately traumatic experience. When I countered with, it's an escapade, she snapped back, you need to hit rock bottom. But it's a difficult thing to hit rock bottom when you're making close to $3 million a year.